thank you everyone for joining us. Especially a little extra thank you to those who were with us last time as well. So if you're back, great to have you back again. Last time we actually had people joining us from across the globe. We had people from Egypt, from Brazil, from the US, from Canada, from India. It was fantastic. So why not share where you are from, and let's see how widespread we managed to get this time. Hi, Eduardo. Hi, Joe. Great to see you guys. So who am I doing all of this talking? So my name is Luis, and I am your host here today. I work for YLD. I work as a delivery manager, which means that I work very closely with product teams and development teams. I get to work with designers, I get to work with engineers, building all sorts of digital and techie stuff. So yeah, and most importantly, in my role, I'm also very lucky because I get to be part and work closely with the community people. And that's why I end up on awesome things like meetups and conferences and internal lunches. So I'm very excited to be here. I will do my best to try to guide us through I would say, a very exciting meetup today. You can probably tell, as I've been already saying, we are excited to be back with our second online version, a popular meetup, ReactJS Girls. We used to do them in real life when that was a thing. I don't know if anybody remembers all of that time back then, but it used to be reality. We came back online in January, and now we're here again. And today we have 3 fantastic talks by 4 very awesome speakers. They're going to talk to us about how not to over-engineer state management solutions, global expansion using React, GraphQL, and Storybook, and one for the gamers, how they made a gaming Bible menu. So exciting stuff. Right, before we get going though, I have to go through some logistics. And this is how you know it's a proper webinar, because if you don't have logistics, how do you even know it's real? I'm going to start firstly with our code of conduct. You can find that in the menu bar if you haven't explored around the product yet. So there is a code of conduct. It's pretty standard stuff. It's things like keep your language clean, be kind to each other, don't share anything inappropriate. For those of you, as I said, who haven't explored it yet, we have the discussion. So please do keep the discussion going. You can tell everyone where you're from. You can share anything that you want, as long as you're sticking with the code of conduct. We also have a QA session as well that you should be able to see in the menu bar. That will take you to a Slido deck where you can just type in your question, and you can also upvote other people's questions. And we will go through those questions at the end after all speakers have presented, and we'll have a little conversation with everybody. And of course, social media. Social media is everything today, because otherwise people don't even know this is happening or that we even exist. So make sure that you share or that you tweet, and that you anything that you learned today, any cool quotes, any interesting insights, using the hashtag ReactJS Girls. And if you are not already, do follow us on ReactJS Girls on Twitter. We have people from Russia, from Poland, from Mexico is coming in. This is going to be awesome. So most of you probably know this. Who are we? We are ReactJS Girls. It's basically a meetup aiming, well, the meetup itself is aimed at women, and everyone, of course, is welcome. But ultimately, it's a platform to voice for women engineers who want to learn or teach others about their experiences using mainly React. But as I said, everyone is welcome. So please spread the word with all genders in your networks, and let's make the community grow even further. The community is actually supported by YLD. And I am very happy to say that we have someone from YLD here, and it's a good time for our YLD sponsor to come in and say a couple of words. So I believe that we have Hattie on the call.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Luis. As Luis said, my name's Hattie. I'm on the people team from YLD, and we are sponsoring the event. So I'm just here to give kind of a very brief introduction about who we are before we move on to some great talks. So we are an engineering and design consultancy. We work with quite a big range of different clients on different projects, and we're aiming to try and help them improve their digital capabilities. And that's something that we do through software engineering and web design. So we're a very collaborative team, very creative team, trying to use technology in the most innovative ways possible to help our clients. Trying by embedding within the company we work with and helping them from the inside out. So we're focused on trying to have an open collaborative environment as well within our company, where we can share knowledge. So hence why you might see us involved in events like this one. And at the moment, we do have a number of vacancies available, for example, in quite a few product design roles and a lot of engineering roles as well, mostly JavaScript, so focused a lot on React and Node. So do take a look at our website or share it with a friend, anyone who's looking. The website is yld.io and the available roles are listed on Join Us page. But you can also click here on the sponsor tab and that will take you to our website. Or you can look on our social medias and just send us a message through there. If you've got any questions, have to be about job vacancies, can just be about anything that you're interested in. And yeah, that's it from me. So I will hand you back to Louise.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Yeah, as you can see, we have a lot of great openings at YLD. So don't be shy. Please feel free to reach out if you are looking for a new opportunity. Okay, so I think that we have come to the point that you've all been waiting for, and it's actually to have a little chat with our speakers. So what are we going to do is I'm going to ask our lovely speakers to come in and on the call with me. So they are all hiding behind the cameras. There we go. They are appearing. There we are. Excellent. They are appearing. Thank you so much. Right. So what I'm going to do is first of all, we're going to go around and we're going to allow each of the speakers to just give us a little bit of a quick introduction to who they are, what they're currently working on. I'm sure they'll be talking about more about that on the talk itself, but just as a quick little intro. Why don't we start with, how about you, Laura?
Hi, everyone. I'm pretty glad to be here today. I work as a software engineer at YOD, and I've been studying React for almost 2 years, kind of my passion, my favorite technology. So pretty glad to be here because when I started to learn React, ReactJS Girls was kind of the first event that took me into the React world. So yeah, looking forward to great talks today. And feel free to reach me out later to in social media to talk about the talk.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Cool. Thank you. Great to have you here, Laura. Okay, let's move on. Let's say hi to Gilly.
Hi, really pleased to be here. Really excited to be doing my first meetup talk. I work for Octopus Energy / Kraken Technologies, and I look after a team of 3 amazing front-end developers. And yeah, looking forward to sharing some of what we've been doing with you.
Fantastic. Thank you. We are looking forward to hear about that as well. So let's move over to Joey.
Hey everybody, I'm Joey. I have been working at the Love Bible group for nearly 3 years now, doing a lot of really cool stuff with React and a little bit of React Native. I absolutely love it. React is my favorite thing. And yeah, we're going to show you some stuff that we've built a little bit later on, which we're quite excited about.
Awesome. We are excited about that as well. So especially if you have gamers on here, you should be extra excited. Okay, and last but not least, welcome, Paulina.
Hello, my name is Paulina, and I work as a software engineer at Ladviable Group with Joe. And this is my first year in tech, so I am really excited to be here, especially on the other side as a speaker. So yeah, I'm quite excited about it.
Excellent. I'm very glad to have you here as well. So just to say as well, we have a couple of the speakers are sort of speaking for the first time. So we are very, very happy and very, very proud to be able to give a platform for first-time speakers as well. So yes, I have a little question for all of you. Well, we all know that we've been in lockdown for what seems like forever by now. And as I said earlier, there was a time before lockdown. I don't know if people remember it. We are sort of in various places in the world. They're starting to open up a little bit, which is very lovely. And obviously with these unprecedented circumstances, there's been a lot of challenges for everybody. But I actually wanted to look at, has there been anything positive? So I don't know if either of you have sort of come across something unexpected that happened over the last year or something positive. Just to give an example, like for myself, I think that I actually learned how to do remote work, to do my job remotely. I never thought that would be possible. That's something for me, which is really positive. And also because our company has an office in a different country, in Portugal, I actually have become closer to that team, because everyone's are kind of equally far away or equally close, however you want to look at it. So I don't know if any of you have anything positive that has happened. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, I completely agree with that. Me and my partner are both developers. We've been able to go full remote, and it's been, highly enabled by everybody else going full remote. And yeah, we've been able to move to be closer to family, and that's been wonderful.
That's fantastic. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Gilly. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to say that it's exactly the same with me, especially for me as a person who just started. So yeah, I had like a unique opportunity to work remotely for over a year now. So yeah, it's like really good experience for me. And I think the second one is that I could spend more time with friends and family. Yeah, that this is like the positive
Brilliant.
part of lockdown.
Yeah, I agree with that. I managed to spend some time back home with my family, and that would have never happened normally. So exactly. Yes, absolutely. And what about Joey or Laura?
Well, for me, I kind of had almost the opposite experience, because I live alone. So I've been isolating pretty much on my own this whole time. So I've had to learn kind of how to be in my own head all the time, It's been really kind of tricky. But I guess the one positive thing is that I am finally going to see all my family in a couple of weeks for the first time in about 18 months, which is awesome.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, that is the best thing of being allowed back out again, is to be able to spend time with family and friends and seeing the world properly again. Yes, so I totally empathize with you, Joey. I'm also living by myself, and there are moments when I'm just like, oh, is it just me in the world? But, there is a big online community like this one here, so very glad. Laura, from your side, is there anything that you have sort of discovered this year that has been a positive thing for you?
I joined YOD. It's was an amazing opportunity because it was my first international job. So I'm based in Brazil, working in a different time zone and meeting engineers from all over the world. So yeah, it's been really great so far. And also the second thing is that I'm here today. As I said before, ReactJS Girls was the event that I've always liked it since the beginning, since I think 2019. I don't know, when I started to learn React. Amazing speakers that I've always was learning with, and I'm here today. So
fantastic. Really... That is great. You know what? I think you proved my point earlier, where people are so much closer. I keep on forgetting that you're based in Brazil, and it's so far away. I'm based in London, and it's just so far, I can't even imagine. And it doesn't even feel like that because of sort of this online environment at the moment. So there are definitely some positives. But yes, absolutely. As I said to Joey, I completely agree. There has been some really tough times, and sometimes it's hard. But I really think we also must remember that there has been some positive changes, and there have been some positive outcomes of this. I'm really glad to hear that you all have had something. So with that, we are going to soon move over and actually get started with the talks themselves. I just wanted to have a little quick look at the chat. And so we have a hello from Bucharest, and now we have people from Madrid have joined, Portugal, we have some people from London, Greece, nice, Mexico, we mentioned that. This is awesome. And this is what happens when you go online, and this is fantastic. Okay, so I want to thank all of you for that quick chat and getting to know everybody a little bit better. We're going to move over to our first talk. And so I'll say bye to the other speakers for now. You'll be back shortly. But in the meantime, I want to give the digital stage to our first presenter, and that is Laura. So Laura, please, the digital stage is all yours.
Okay, everyone, I would just need a minute to share my screen.
While you do that, Guatemala, that is also far away. This is so cool.
Okay. I think that you can see my Zoom cameras, right? I don't know if, yeah, that's
yeah, at the moment, there we go. We are ready. So I think we are, if you just press that, there we go.
Okay, but you can see the Zoom cameras, right? Just to confirm.
Yes, exactly. So it's coming. Don't worry. It's okay. Getting there.
Okay, so let's start then.
Let's go for it.
As I said before, hi everyone. I'm really glad to be here today. The topic of today's talk is going to be how to not over-engineer state management solutions. The motivation for me to be here today presenting this specific topic is because when I started to learn React was one of the difficult ones, I would say, especially on my first job. The majority of the issues when building React application was related with state management. So I hope to bring some insightful things here today, good knowledge. And let me just turn my light off because the sun doesn't like me today. Okay, I think it's better. So I'm based in Brazil. Just a quick introduction before we start. We already did it before, but I prepared this slide. So anyway, the things that I'm learning right now is TypeScript. I'm doing some fun projects with Python. I work with JavaScript, React, and sometimes Node.JS. Regarding personal things, I'm really into music. I've been playing violin since a while, and I'm a big fan of Harry Potter. So if you want to talk with me about any of these things, feel free to reach me out on Twitter or LinkedIn. And if you want to know what I'm doing right now regarding personal projects, feel free to also follow me on GitHub. Now, the summary of today's talk is going to be, first of all, going back a little bit to how React started and what was the main motivation. I think that it's also related to state management, one of the main goals why React was created. So we are going to take a look at it. Seeing React as an UI state solution itself, before going to installing an NPM library or going to external solutions. Understanding different types of states. This specific topic, this specific part actually is not completely tied to React, so you can try to use this knowledge in other front-end libraries or frameworks. When you start using different state management solutions other than React, what React already provides, and how to choose a state management solution and avoid over-engineering it. So some disclaimers. If you change your mind about state management solutions after watching this talk, please don't go refactor an application straight away. I'm saying this because state management is something really like the heart of a code base. And probably if you change something right now, something's going to break. And also probably is going to be a big change regarding, depending on the level of the life cycle of the application. So talk to your team before and try to give like good points of why you're changing and what are the benefits that it's going to bring. Also, every year or every month, there's a new state management solution, a new library, a new state management style. For instance, we had atomic state management, which was something new at the community some while ago. And it may be overwhelming to try to know or learn all of them, like know all the documentation. But I think that we just need to be aware of this, and that's what I'm going to try to explain today. And also my apologies if you hear something in the background. It's my family somehow yelling, but yeah, my apologies. Okay, so first part of the talk, going back to React's origin. React was released in 2013, and I think that when it was released, it really shifted the way to deal with state and the UI. So I don't want to compare with any technology, but it's a good example to give. Angular at the time, for instance, was one of the front-end technologies that was really difficult to deal with, syncing some data to the UI. Also, the algorithm behind it wasn't to optimize it. And when React came, Facebook introduced an algorithm for call it reconciliation algorithm to handle these updates regarding a state. So we didn't need anymore to do imperative changes in order to deal with state. And then I was reading through the React docs and I found a pretty interesting code. React is a library for building composable user interfaces. It encourages the creation of reusable UI components which present data that changes over time. So present data that changes over time. This is basically a simple definition of state. And that's why I think that React is intrinsically not just a front-end library, but since the beginning, one of the main goals was to bring React as a better solution for handling state. So since the beginning, we already had something really good that could handle the majority of cases without needing to opt out for other solutions. But in order to just explain more about that, I think that we need to see React as a state solution itself. Some while ago, I was watching a video of a front-end engineer called Sen Silikov, and he mentioned a really interesting thing, which he compared React as a UI language, kind of a programming language, but a UI language. It was really interesting comparison because he mentioned that React exposes a lot of tools, which makes us to have freedom to build our UI or code without needing to follow a structure specifically. But by doing that, we need to be aware of what tools React bring, and we need to be aware of how to use it properly. So that's basically what I'm going to show right now. Like, we need to be aware of what was the changes behind the time related to state management in React. And I think that it really started with class-based components, the way that we handle state with class-based components. So when React was first released oh my God, my English is really good today. So all components were treated as classes. Then ES6 came, we were able to use syntax sugar. Instead of using .create class method, which syntax sugar using the class syntax is much better. Functional components didn't have the possibility to use state at the time because we didn't had things such as hooks. And it was really hard to share UI state logic between components. Then we had to rely on things such as Hawk's hierarchy components, which were good, but it isn't too readable comparing to other solutions that we have nowadays and that we are going to see in the other slides. But this is a snippet of a simple class-based component using some this.set state, changing state, and also change the UI based on it. Then in 2019, we were kind of blasted with hooks. And yeah, this changed a lot of things. Was really hooks introduced a really easier possibility to extract common UI state behavior from different components. And each component then has its own local state. And then we are able to use kind of tree structure, architecture, things such as lifting state up when needing to share a local state with other components. And when we as React engineers know how to use composition, local state management, which are things that in the React docs, they really try to explain as much as possible. It avoids all, actually not all, but the majority of prop drilling issues. And this is a really important point that I'm going to talk later, but just to talk really quick, I think that back in the days, the majority of code bases started to use Redux because some engineers thought at first that Redux was a solution for prop drilling. But the majority of the time, it's solved just by taking a time and trying to recompose your application tree. Then after that, we had the context API plus hooks. So first of all, just to start, the context API itself, it's a solution that is not related to state. It's a solution to provide, given a certain value to the components tree. So it's basically a provider of a value, but then when using it with state, such as use state hook or use reducer, you're able to sync that data with the tree without needing to pass it component to component in the tree manually. And also in some cases avoiding prop drilling if you're not, if you didn't find a way to compose your tree architecture in a way that is going to avoid prop drilling. So context API can be combined with hooks in order to extract common logics, and context shouldn't handle a single global state. This is a really important thing that I want to talk. We are aware that the context API has some performance issues. We are aware of this, for instance, just to try to explain this. If we are using a component that is just using one specific value of a context API, not the whole object, and the other property that my component is not using changes, my component is going to hinder anyway. So there are different techniques to solve this for now. There's memoization and everything, but the React team is already working on a specific hook to select the values from the context API and avoid these hindering issues. But the point is that sometimes I see that this problem is not just related with performance, but the way that people manage the state inside a context. You shouldn't declare a huge object there, like if it was kind of your Redux star, but you should try to keep it as small as possible and really intersect related to parts of your tree architecture, so little context APIs, because in that way, you're going to avoid the whole tree hindering again all the time. So yeah, my point here is that React is a state management library. If you read this at first, I know that it's going to sound weird, but if we go back and we try to understand one of the motivations of React and what it brings for us as a library, we know that it handles the state management. But then in order to understand that, I think that we need to be aware of what is state itself, what are the different types of states, because when we are aware of this, we know how to deal with it, not just regarding to application architecture itself, but also what are the tools that we're going to use? What are the changes in the UI that is going to be applied regarding to this state? And this is one issue that I see in a lot of code bases, especially with server cache state. So first of all, UI state. What is UI state? It's really useful to control UI interactivity. I don't know if I wrote that right, but interactivity. Okay, interactivity such as color mode, models, etc. Server cache state, which is a state stored on the server and which is cached on the client side for quick access. So this specific definition, it's really a short one. It's not just for quick access, but it's to handle other things such as optimist updates and everything. I'm going to talk about this type of state later because I've been seeing it. If this type of state, server cache state, is handled in an incorrect way, your application may have a lot of issues regarding UX, scalability, the way that the user interacts with the data really changes. For instance, just to give a quick example, I've noticed some code bases using client-side libraries to store server data, such as Redux. And at a certain point, it starts to apply a lot of complexity because you have to deal with statuses such as is loading, has error, everything manually, and you forget about the major cases, retrying, invalidation, and everything. So we're going to get into it later. URL state, it's a state management by the browser location URL, and really useful to save certain filters when refreshing pages. So I don't know if you as a user, for instance, go to a cart on a website and you want to filter the products by certain categories, then the state is URL state because the URL needs to persist the filters. For instance, if you want to save the URL to go back again, you have the filters right there. So this is a kind of state. When to start using different state management solutions other than React? First of all, I hate to say, I'll try. It's a kind of a speaker weird thing, but I'm going to try to improve on that. I swear. The first one is to manage a server cache state. Since it's a really hard problem to handle from zero, I heavily recommend using React Carry. I know that is really weird to just recommend a React Carry at first. I know that there are other technologies such as SWR, which is really good too, but my recommendation is React Carry. I'm going to tell why. And also, I have a strong opinion on this, but you feel free to use other libraries. It's not a absolute rule here. The reason that I would recommend to use React Carry to deal with server cache state is that it handles the majority of cases and the API is pretty easy to read and to maintain, to explain to other people. It's pretty nice maintainable by the community. And all the projects that I've used it so far handle it very well. It was very scalable. So it handles optimist updates. It handles error retrying, all of types of revalidation, is proposition recovery, and everything. We're going to see about it more later on. If you are having performance issues with Context API and want a simple solution for a global UI state store, I heavily recommend Zusen or Jotai. So let's say that you already used Context API. You already tried it, at least you tried it. You didn't jump to an external solution at first. I really recommend using Zusen or Jotai because these libraries, they don't require to understand a whole new architecture. It's really simple. It's a state object and you need to access something in it. I would say that Jotai, it's a little bit more specific because it deals with atomic state management when you need to be comfortable with learning a new paradigm, I would say, to deal with state, but it's pretty good too. Both are amazing libraries, very maintainable, and pretty easy to start doing something. It doesn't introduce the overhead when you need to add a new UI state property and access it. It's really pretty straightforward. You declare, you access. There are no more steps other than that. Third point, you don't want to use context API plus hooks and want a simple third-party library as a state management solution. I heavily recommend using Zustand or Jotai. You see that the third one, it's almost equal to the second one, but it's just to emphasize here my point. So if you really don't want to use it, so let's say that, okay, I don't care that React has a lot of tools for me and I want to use Zustand because I don't want to deal with performance issues in the future. I already know that my application is going to be like the same size of Twitter or Facebook. So I'm going to use Zustand or Jotai, or I just want to use Zustand because I really like it and I like the developer experience of it. So in this case, I really recommend it using these tools anyway. And also continue with it. I love it, this image that I found on Twitter. The creator of Zustand, I think, or one of the maintainers of Zustand or Jotai. This guy is really good at state management solutions. I really recommend going on his Twitter. He posted this image that I found really interesting to share with you right now, which is kind of a simplified decision tree to choose a global state library. You first start asking yourself, I want something magically simple. It's not actually a question, right? I want something magically simple solutions. If you want a magically simple solution, then there is another point. I'm familiar and comfortable with React context. And if you is familiar with React context, then React Factored is a really good point. It's a really good option because it handles all the performance issues that React context has. It introduced one more layer of abstraction, and it's pretty good if you're already familiar with React context because you can get all the benefits of it and you don't have to be too concerned about performance issues. So if you're not familiar with React context, but you want something magical, then Voltio, it's a really good one too. It really has a more like a magical approach. It's not something as usual as declaring a start and just accessing it. There's more, it uses a proxy methodology of state that I'm not going to get into detail right now, but I really recommend you going on the GitHub repo and trying to read more about it later. If you don't want something magical, then there are simple solutions. But if you want something that is not magical and that is something new and futuristic, Jotai as an atomic management library is really good. And something that is really straightforward, doesn't need to learn atomic management. State management, Zustand, it's really good too. Now, the polemic question that I needed to mention, why not to use Redux? And why I'm mentioning Redux specifically here. So a lot of the code bases that I've started to see throughout the consultant companies that I've worked at before, introduced Redux to the code base. The engineering choice wasn't regarding to the goal of Redux and to the cases of really why you should use Redux, but the case was we are suffering from prop drilling. We need to share something globally and we are going to use Redux. The point is that when you make this choice, most engineers start to get issues such as really hard experience to onboard new engineers to the code base. I've already experienced this. We had a legacy application with a legacy Redux store. And when new engineers came to the code base, I had to explain about the whole Redux store and all the flux because it's a huge quantity of reducers, actions creator, dispatch calls, and everything in certain points of the application that you have to be aware of what is happening. And also there's an overhead when you start to, okay, I need a new piece of state. Then I'm going to declare a reducer that needs an action to change any state value. There's now new things, which is middlewares, where you deal with asynchronous state changes, such as Redux Saga. So my point here is not that Redux is bad. It's really not. I would say that Redux is amazing. Like, what the engineers did to build the Flux architecture and to build Redux really changed the way that we got to know state management at the time. But in the majority of cases, it's not needed, especially in the beginning of your application. It's really wrong when you start an application and you already go yarn add Redux. There's something wrong in it. So the point that I want to emphasize here is that, especially with Redux or other state management tool, before using it, try to really know the motivation of it and what are the benefits that it's going to bring you in the future. One application that I've used Redux before, and that it was really a good choice, was to make features such as undo and redo actions. Because the way that the actions of Redux are declared, it's kind of I don't know how to explain, but it's a timeline. You are able to go back. There is a specific technical term for this that I forgot. I should have wrote in some place, but there are specific cases that Redux is good. But my opinion here is that in the majority of cases, your application aren't going to need it, and you're going to end up introducing some overhead for the majority of the engineers. Now about server cache state. So the first thing that I would recommend is to search for libraries that handle the following points. First of all, polling on interval, revalidation on focus, revalidation on network recovery, local mutation, optimistic UI, smart error retry, and pagination and scroll position recovery. So the majority of cases, what I've seen the community using is SWR and React Carry, because these are amazing libraries that handle these cases and are heavily maintained and recommended by the community. So really go for these options. And the UX, the developer experience of dealing with server cache state is going to be much better. You're going to bring a lot of benefits. So if you're watching this right now and you notice that your code base, your project that you're maintaining or your company is not dealing in the correct way with server cache state, try to show to your manager, the engineer that is responsible in a high level for the project, what are the benefits that using these tools are going to bring. And I'm sure that your team is going to understand. The final takeaways that I want to leave here today is, in the first place, we should try to solve state issues by using React solutions. One thing that I forgot to mention is that, yes, state management is hard. And this is also related to the title of my talk today. But we make it harder by over-engineering it. And one way to start thinking about it is that when we are architecting a React application, we always think about the layout architecture. So the way that we're going to compose the X structure regarding to how they lay out, what is going to be the output of it. But we should also start using composition and tree architecture to think about application state. And if we start pushing us forward on it, I'm sure that over-engineering problems regarding state management are going to decrease. Don't use any library before being aware of the benefits and your code base needs. Be aware of the different types of states and how solutions change for each one. and try as much as possible to keep state close to its dependent functions. So this last topic, it's really an important thing. I've noticed that when you are managing local state in the correct way, without having properly or trying to declare store global state properties that aren't needed. There are cases, for instance, that when you delete a component that is using a certain data, you leave the state there. You forgot to delete the state property. So it's kind of a trash code there that is not going to be used in the future, but you don't know when you deleted some piece of code, even if it was dependent, because it's not close. So there are situations when we can't do this. We need to treat the data property as global. But yeah, the point here that we need to try as much as possible to keep state at its dependent function, because it really improves maintainability. So that's it for today's talk. I really hope that everyone enjoyed it. This is my opinion on the topic, but don't take my opinion as absolute. I really want you to see what is your opinion. So reach me out on social media. Tell me what you think about the topic. And really glad to be here again. Hope everyone enjoyed it, and looking forward to the other talks too.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Great. So Laura, thank you. Brilliant. One quick comment from me. Magical or not magical, always choose magic. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of magic. We are back. We're looking forward to see you back again for the QA session. So for those of you who have questions, I'm just going to post the link to the question slide deck, just in case. So that is now in the chat. So any questions for Laura, please put them in there. Any questions for the other speakers, please put them in there, and we collect them all, and then we have a lovely Q&A session at the end. All right, so without further ado, it is time for us to move on to our second speaker. And for this one, I want to welcome Gilly to the digital stage.
Oh.
Hello, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Fantastic, glad to hear it. So, right, the digital stage is all yours. Please take it away.
Fantastic, right. Screen sharing, first hurdle. Cool. Can you see some slides about white labeling?
We can indeed.
Brilliant. Okay, so first of all, thanks so much, Laura. What a brilliant talk. Really looking forward to following that. But yeah, so as I mentioned before, my name is Gilly and I work for Octopus Energy, and we're a tech-based green energy supplier, and we sometimes talk about ourselves more as a tech company that does energy currently. And what I want to talk to you about today is the problem we had to solve around white labeling and global expansion, and how we used React and Storybook and GraphQL to help us solve it. So I'll take you through some of the lessons that we learned and dive into a few kind of technical tips that we picked up along the way. So first of all, the team I look after, the mission of our team is to put the power of our tech platform Kraken into the hands of our users via our online portal. And to understand what that means, I kind of have to explain a bit more about the history of Octopus and Kraken technologies. So if I take you back to about 2016-ish, at this point, we're very much a challenger energy supplier. There's a fair few new entrants into the market in 2016, and there were a few components to Octopus Energy at that point. The landscape of it, sometimes known as the Celosphere. The Juniper system was our third-party customer service product, which came to us as part of the energy supplier in a box sort of setup process. We had the embryonic Kraken system, which is our own bespoke customer service system that we've been building for a number of years now. We had the first version of the Octopus Energy website, lacking our now much cooler branding. But most importantly, we had the people behind it all. We were all assembled to disrupt the UK energy market, and in particular the Big Six, which by and large had found that they made the most amount of money by bringing in customers at a loss and then gradually increasing the prices for the long-standing customers to offset that cost. And we knew that the energy market needed a change. There are big challenges coming with decarbonisation. We're feeling that already. And we knew that we could use technology to help drive this forward and to make a big green dent in the universe. So at this point, we had about 30 energy specialists. There are about 10 developers, no QA, sorting about 90,000 customers, supporting them in their day-to-day kind of management through a combination of those different systems. And then we grew. So at this point, we have 3 brands that we're operating out of the Octopus Energy Kraken instance alone. So that's Octopus Energy, M&S Energy, and London Power, which are our white label brands. We also support E.ON Next and Good Energy in the UK, as they have instances of the Kraken technology, as do other energy companies across more than 6 countries. There are now, we think, about 2 million customers, both in the UK, and probably double that if you look across the entire Stellosphere at this point. And now we've got over 1,000 energy specialists, probably about 100 developers, still no QA. And I kind of want to talk to you about the 2 events that really defined how we matured as a platform. There were 2 kind of really big flashpoints for us. And the challenge was not just delivering on those, but being able to continue to drive innovation in the market in the UK while delivering these kind of either complex rebrands or even outright large migration projects without stopping, kind of without taking our foot off the gas of the innovation. So at the same time that we expanded in this way, we've also launched world first tariffs to help with decarbonisation. We've ended up with an investment event at the end of 2020 that valued us at just over $2 billion. So to understand some of that history and some of that growth, I want to kind of take you back to about 2018, which was just before we'd started our first brand, which was the M&S Energy white label. We'd eliminated the third-party Juniper system at this point through a project called Jexit, and Kraken was now the beating heart of our energy business. And it delivers a really low cost to serve customers through lots of automations, which was the technology arm of the company kind of taking over. And it empowers our energy specialists to really take ownership of customer issues and deliver an outstanding service, which is something that we felt had been missing from the energy industry in the UK. So we had 2 big challenges on our plates at this point. One, how do 2 front-end developers support 2 totally different websites that are essentially kind of offering a very similar function? It's managing your energy account in the UK. And then how do we build an API and a website very quickly that we can hand over to an entirely different company? We needed to be able to customize our customer experience for a new brand and our entire offering for a new market. And these are the challenges that led us to our Blueprint product. So what's Blueprint? It's our documentation, so user journeys and API queries and branding. It's our development environment. It's our storybook and an example React application. But ultimately, it's our way of working in a box. So what we do is we build something simple that solves a problem for users. We ship it, we test it, we refine it, and we blueprint it. It's become a verb for us. And all of these steps are done by the developer. So I think our first lesson really that we wanted to tell people about was that giving developers ownership of projects, that will empower them like nothing else will. And it's something that Kraken has been doing since the beginning. And it now powers kind of over 3 million accounts. And we work really closely with the operations staff in order to learn from them about the industry that they know best. So what's all of this got to do with GraphQL or React or Storybook? So people aren't just buying the tech from us. People who are competitors, people like E.ON, are coming to Kraken Technologies and they're buying our operating model. They need to be able to easily see what we have to offer. We need to be able to set them up with an MVP very quickly. And we need to train their staff in our ways of working, not just their operations staff, but their technical staff. So their technical staff need to be able to self-serve our technology as much as possible to give their developers the tools they need to drive their business in the way that our tech team has driven ours. So how do we do that? We've got kind of 3 main deliverables to the Blueprint project. The first one's the Storybook, as I've mentioned. The second one is the sample React application. And then the third one is the API. So the Blueprint app is a nice kind of vanilla example application of a UK energy product. And it's fully deployable. So it's something that we can give clients to deploy as soon as they've branded it up. comes with a mock API that's generated directly from the GraphQL schema. And that's been one of the really fantastic wins for us around GraphQL, is the fact that it's typed makes it incredibly trivial to spin up a mock API. We also use these mocks in Storybook. So Storybook allows us to look at the different states of components, and the components can be quite complex and stateful in the energy industry. And it also allows us to see the different themes we have available. So we have MS Energy and London Power. It also shows us our tone of voice. And I'll go into a little bit more about how we do this in a minute. One of the brilliant things about Storybook Docs is that it lets us show the different states for the components we've developed alongside the queries that we use for them as well. So it's very much a one-stop shop for how you build a page. So some of the key things that we learned kind of across producing this product, and not just kind of making the product as an end goal, but the process of doing it, were avoiding if statements and switch statements. And these will certainly be things that exist in our code base. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't use those as a mean to an end, but we found very quickly that they lead to bloat in the code base. Every time that you want to add a new brand or a new client instance, you have to add another branch to these statements everywhere that they appear. And code being easy to change, we found, was much more important than it being dry. Having simple functions that perform simple tasks means fewer surprises and fewer things that break. Dependency injection, it does add a layer of indirection, but it also offers a lot of flexibility. So there's a balancing act there between code being important to being easy to change, and that's often a case of just it being easy to follow. But also the fact that you don't want it be just so simple that you just have to go and add elements to these branches at each point. Enums are a great way to help with this sometimes, and particularly enums in GraphQL, they can really help self-document stateful processes. And the more that you can self-document, the more people can self-serve, and that helps reduce questions on both sides. Some of the hardest lessons to learn, I think, are that the first version of anything you build will be sacrificial. I am really happy to chat through that with anybody, after the session, because I think that's controversial. But I've definitely found, as my knowledge of the domain of a project evolves, I will, however well-intentioned the first version of anything that I build is, I will look back on it and know that I could do it a lot better. So the more I can learn faster, the better my product will be, and the more I'll be able to keep on delivering. And that's the main thing that we've found as a business over and over again, is that having the perfect solution is secondary to being able to deliver a solution. So I've been chatting a little bit about ways and means, but I want to dig into some code and show you a little bit of the tips and tricks I mentioned before. So this is my very favorite one, because actually I learned some of this from a ReactJS Girls talk. So massive shout out to Jen Crichton for her incredible talk at the ReactJS Girls conference. And she was talking about the how and why of flexible React components. And I looked at this and just light bulb went off in my brain, because we were making a component at the time, which you can see from Storybook here, has a lot of different states to it. So you can see that this is the meter point status component. When you're bringing a meter point onto supply, it'll go through a number of industry processes, and we want to keep the customer informed and up to date. These processes, the list fully comes as an enumeration from the API. And what that lets us do is something like this. So I've simplified this with the account status example, and I've just shown you a few example statuses that an account can be in. You can see here that they're easy to document. You can pick that up from the schema and understand what these different states are. And if you want a component like this one here, which shows you some custom messaging based on the status, it's really easy to read this component to see how it's just taking in a status and choosing a component to show you. It's very easy to add more statuses to this component, and the code won't grow massively as you do. And that was Jen's ultimate insight, was that you want to be able to easily fit this component on a page, easily scan what it does. And all we did was plug in an enum into this object, and boom, instant documentation. So a similar idea was around bringing mix-ins to style components. We were on a roll at this point. And the first thing that we needed to think about was the kind of ultimate API for a brand is its colors. So we had 3 brands. We had Octopus Energy, M&S, and London Power, and they each came with their own set of like brand colors, and they each came with different numbers of brand colors as well. There's very simple for M&S Energy, like quite a great palette for London Power, somewhere in the middle for Octopus Energy. And what we needed to be able to do was design components that didn't care what brand they were in, that didn't have lots of if statements asking the question, what brand am I in? They just wanted to know what color they should be. So this is nice and simple. And what it does is it goes to the theme and it says, okay, what color should a nav link be? And the way that we marry up the brand identity and the theme file itself is just through a function. So we call these mixins because they're very much inspired by Sass mixins. But really all you do is you take these highly brand specific colors and you plug them just into a common language. You just develop a common API between your themes for your colors. And that kind of leads me to a point, which is you should have certain interfaces that can know about your different brands if this is the kind of problem that you're solving, but you should try and keep knowledge of those brands to those places. So we have an Octopus Energy theme file and an M&S theme file, and those are the only places you'll see colors like hemocyan, because that's the only place that knows it's an Octopus Energy theme file. Once it gets passed into the theme and into the code shouldn't care at that point. Here is roughly what that function looks like. It's very simple, just takes in a bunch of colors and turns them into the sort of shapes that you then might want to access in your components. And that's how we build this storybook story. So this story is exactly the same for each brand. There is no separate story for each of these brands. It iterates through those colors available and shows them. So another nice way of using this to show different brand components without using any if statements. So what we wanted to avoid in, say, this component, which has a very kind of octopus identity on the octopus theme and then a much blander identity in the other themes, is instead of doing something like if mascot in the React component, we've used a background image, and we have got this in the styled component in the styled file itself. So all we're asking the theme is for that component, what's the not found background, and then only the octopus theme imports that very octopus specific asset and passes that into the theme file. So this is kind of a common theme that we were returning to, was just having single points that know about your brands. And then we developed this even further, and we started saying, well, if we've got these functions, these mixins that let us create these components, when we had to do a rebrand for Octopus Energy, when suddenly the cars that were white, needed to take on some new colors. And if anybody's kind of been at an organization for a while, you know that rebrands, you don't tend to try and roll that out across the entire site in one great pull request. It'll be something that you build up through a number of journeys. There are a number of ways that you can solve this. And a common one I've seen with Sass is having like a top level style rule, for example, and adjusting the styles that kind of come under that with that parent class. What we found here is that actually you can just have a type or variant prop, very similar to in Jen's first example, where we've got our primary, secondary, and tertiary hero cards. So that allows us to have this hero card mixin that defines the API for this component. And then what we do is we pull out these styles here based on the variant. And that means if I've got multiple themes, which usually just have the single variant of this, I can always fall back to the primary and then say if Octopus Energy wants to have 3 different kinds of these cards or just different kinds as we go through our rebrand, I can select the styles based on the variant in this line here. And I'm not, again, asking which variant it is, having kind of long complex branching. I'm simply selecting the styles based on a key in an object. So that, I think, is enough about styling, and let's have a chat about tone of voice for internationalization, because translating your applications is always one of the challenging things as a front-end developer. How's my design going to respond to different languages? Is it going to make any sense? So when we were looking at our languages, I was like, well, it's all English. We're very lucky that these 3 brands are all in English, and then in Australia it was also in English. But actually, they want to use fundamentally different copy between these things. So they want to vary their style and they want to vary their tone of voice. Why not use the same sort of language solution here? So we're then ready when more of these translations need to come along. So here you can see the joining story. between the different brands, that's quite unique to each brand, and it has different copy, and yet it still all lives in the same component. And only the translation files will have the specific language needed for each theme and each brand. So common components don't care which brand they're in, specific files for particular brands do. Sacrificial constructs. We talked right at the end there about the first version of something being sacrificial. So GraphQL is great for this. That was something that we really learned, is that when you don't version your API so much as adding and deprecating fields and being able to select arbitrarily which fields you want to retrieve from a query, what that means you can do is write a sacrificial field that perhaps has like an odd specificity to it that you know isn't quite right. And then you can replace that later on and then just drop the older one from your UI. You can deprecate it, you can add that to the documentation. And that lets you focus on solving the problem in front of you rather than worrying that you're boxing yourself into a corner. Working code is better than no code. Here was our first sacrificial construct. So when we built the Australian product, this was what we produced. We were really happy with it at the time. It was something that we needed to produce to prove that our API could support logging into a website, could support creating a password, viewing data, and that this data would be specific to the Australian industry. So we managed to do all of that, but this site was never actually used in practice. It formed the basis of documentation for the Australian API as a proof point that we were kind of that mature as a platform. Because it was never used and because we didn't spend a huge amount of time over engineering it, it did exactly what we needed it to do in the minimum amount of time that we had to offer. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't mind that it was never used. It got us to Blueprint. This actually came before the deployable React application that is Blueprint today. So it was a step along the road and a very welcome one. So the sort of final thoughts that I wanted to offer here, because I've been talking a lot about React and Storybook and GraphQL and how they're all sort of used together. There's a Terry Pratchett quote that I love, which sort of talks about how you progress by mixing absolutely everything up and seeing what happens, and that it's got to be worth a try. And I think that is fundamentally kind of what's kept us going as a business, is we keep trying and we keep developing and we keep innovating. And I've always thought that sometimes you kind of hear people saying, I'm waiting for inspiration so that I can take action and achieve my outcome. And I think that actually action leads to inspiration, and that gives you your outcome. So whatever your problem is, however overwhelming it might seem, doing something is always better than doing nothing, and it's always got to be worth a try. If that sounds good, we're hiring Octopus Energy. You can check out our roles on the careers page there. And if you've got any questions, please do stick around for the QA. I'll be around, or you can get me on Twitter. I'm at @SoEclecticGames. But yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There we go. Here we are. Excellent. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. So one thing that I just wanted to make as a quick comment on, which I find really interesting, and I 100% agree with it, is that your first version will be sacrificial. I think that's something, it's a very good motto that anybody who works in product engineering design should adopt. So be ready for that. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions for Gilly, then please use the slide deck. As she said, do hang around for the Q&A. There was a mention as well from a previous conference from a previous speaker. I will share the link to that as well later on, because I think that's a really great talk to check out. So Gilly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, so we are ready now to move over to our last talk of the evening, and this is by two speakers. So how fantastic is that? It's time to welcome Joey and Paulina.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today. As we have mentioned, we are from the software engineering team at Lad Bible Group. And part of our work involves building and maintaining a React design platform that powers the front end of our websites. And our presentation is about the 5th Lad Bible Group channel that we have brought to life with this platform, and Gaming Bible, which we launched in October 2020. The designs were unlike anything we had worked with before, and we needed to introduce many new elements into our React design system. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the code behind the menu element and show you how React enables us to implement some complex behaviors. So here is what Gaming Bible looks like on mobile and desktop desktop and mobile devices. On the left, the desktop version has a separate sidebar containing a static menu with corresponding labels next to the icons. As you see, there is no animation or style change when you hover over an icon. It's static in the truest sense. The mobile menu couldn't be more different. There is no room for a sidebar in the mobile viewport, so the menu has to behave very differently. Do you see the Gaming Bible logo in the bottom left corner? Tapping it opens the menu, and let's take a look at how it works. So here is the menu in action. Tap the active icon, and in this case, the home icon with the side logo to open the menu. The other icons have solid red backgrounds to indicate that they are inactive, and only the icon whose page we are currently on has a red and purple gradient. Now, closing the menu can happen in the number of different ways, which we will look at a little later on. As you scroll the menu up and down, you will see the icons changing size. And when an icon intersects with the bottom left area of the screen, what we call the prime position, it scales up in size. Navigation only happens on tap. Scrolling won't trigger it, and that is because the platform icon has its own submenu, which scrolls horizontally when the platform icon is in the prime position. Tapping the platform icon on its own will take you to the PlayStation page, but if you need Xbox or Nintendo content, you need to use the submenu. So, how did we build this component? To begin with, we want to introduce you to concepts that we are seeing more and more of across the web and upon which we relied heavily in building the menu. Firstly, we use the intersection observer API to observe changes in the intersection of each of the icons with the menu container. For example, an icon intersecting with the prime position behaves differently from icon outside of the prime position. The intersection observer watches for icons moving in and out of the prime position and acts accordingly, which we examine further in the next slide. Secondly, we use a lot of event listeners throughout this component. However, the most important one is our scroll event listener, where the intersection observer watches for changes in particular elements. Scroll event listeners watch the entire page for scroll events. This was vital to us in achieving the scroll snap behavior that we'll look at later on. One of the most important parts of our code, as I mentioned, was the intersection observer, which handles the adding and removing of CSS classes on an individual icon, depending upon its position and also whether the route it navigates to is currently active. As you can see in the screenshot of the left, we are on the trending page, and the trending icon also happens to be in the prime position. So it needs to be both bigger and have the red and purple gradient. The intersection observer has added both the in-view and isActive classes to this icon. And on the right side, where we are on the news page, and the news icon has the isActive class with the red purple gradient, and the home button is in the prime position, so it has the in-view class. React is vital to the behavior of the menu and all its subcomponents. We rely heavily on the use effect hook in particular. We use it 3 times within our code. Our first use effect handles event listeners that control the opening and closing of the menu It also creates our intersection observer, which assigns CSS classes to each icon, as we have seen before, and it is active if the icon matches the current location, and in view if it's in prime position. Our second use effect handles the attachment and removal of the intersection observer from our first use effect. On re-render, the observer needs to be removed, then reattached. And our final use effect takes care of our isActive class. It needs to be aware of our current location using the React router props in order to correctly assign the isActive class. And now I will hand it over to Jo, and she will walk you through the code. Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to jump into some code examples now. So hold on to your hats, everyone. It's going to get scary. First up, we're going to look at how the menu opens. So there's always an icon in our prime position, whether the menu is open or not, which the user taps to open the menu. So this icon has an on-click function assigned to it, as you might expect, which adds the isOpen class to the menu. Bear in mind that we target the menu with a useref hook. Once again, React coming in very useful. The onClick also adds a scroll listener, which sets the start position and the finish position of the menu. So this becomes very important when we need to close the menu later on. If the scroll difference between these points is more than 20 pixels in either direction, the menu closes. So the isOpen class also exists on each of our icons, but for the menu, it only has the one job. It expands the menu's height to fit all the icons, which gives us the effect of all the icons scrolling into view on open. So scrolling and snapping. Part of the scrolling behavior involves the icons snapping into prime position as they scroll. So you never see an icon only partially within prime position. The trouble was that we couldn't use CSS scroll snap here. CSS scroll snap relies on the creation of static snap points, and our snap points here need to be dynamic because of the changing sizes of our icons. So we had to create our own solution using the scroll to method from the element API on the menu. Our method move2 removes the observer, does some maths to calculate the distance of the current in-view icon from the top of the menu, and then uses scroll2 to smooth scroll this icon into prime position. Once the scroll2 method has done its job, we need to reattach the observer. So to do this, we make use of the request animation frame on the window API. This method tells the browser that an animation is coming up, which could be something as simple as a scroll event, and then executes a callback function before the next repaint. So in this case, the callback is our attach observer function. But why do we need to remove and reattach the observer here in the first place? It's not exactly a re-render situation. The answer lies with our scroll2 function. We don't want the observer to fire as the scroll happens. Otherwise, it would just keep adding the open class to the submenu whilst we scroll, and we only want that to happen the once. You might have noticed as well that whilst we do a lot of maths to calculate the top of our scroll position, we add an extra 15 pixels to it at the end. That's to account for the vertical margin that we need to leave at the bottom of the menu. Okay, onto the sub-menu of the platforms icon. So when platforms intersects with the prime position, the intersection observer adds the open class to the submenu, and then it scrolls out from the left. But how does the browser know that it's the platform icon in prime position and not any of the other icons? Well, on each of our icons, we create a custom data attribute with the value of each icon's name. So news, trending, platforms, etc. Custom attributes always begin with data dash. So here we call this attribute data dash ID. And all custom attributes of an element can be accessed via the data set property on the element. So in our code example here, we're checking the value of element.datasetID in our intersection observer. When the icon with the dataset ID platform is in prime position, we add the open class to the submenu. And when an icon with another dataset ID moves into prime position, we remove the open class from the submenu. What you'll notice is that this only works for the platform icon at the moment. We haven't implemented a submenu for any of the other icons just now. So there's a good opportunity for us to, in the future, to go back and refactor this code so that we can handle multiple submenus, probably by being a bit more programmatic and checking the dataset ID, and almost certainly setting up multiple ref hooks for each submenu. Finally, closing the menu. As we've seen, we can close the menu by scrolling in either direction. There are also 3 other ways: tapping the active icon again, tapping another icon, which would trigger a navigation anyway, and tapping on another part of the screen. And we handle that by adding a click event listener. So if the user taps anywhere on the screen, it runs our close menu function. However, we did run into a problem with our click event listener. The menu wouldn't close if the user tapped on an iframe inside one of our article pages, and we use a lot of iframes in our articles to display things like videos and social embeds and what have you. So the solution lies in the different type of event that occurs when the user taps into an iframe. It's not a click event that happens within the page, but instead it's a blur event. Our article page loses focus to the iframe. So we created a blur event listener that grabs the tag name of the element that the user's tapped, and if it's an iframe, run close menu. So what did we learn from our experience in building this menu? It was a difficult task for sure. There were so many scenarios that we had to account for, and the different interactions between the icons and their positions and their sizes. In fact, our code would have looked very different if all our icons were all the same size all the time. For instance, we might have been able to get away with using standard CSS scroll snap instead of having to roll our own solution. But far and away, the most important aspect of our development process, as it is with all of our projects, but especially with one as demanding as Gaming Bible, was staying in constant contact with our design team. We're very fortunate to have a very close relationship with our designers, and being able to have a quick feedback cycle is a real blessing. At each stage of development, no matter the size of the component or the functionality, we don't raise a pull request until our designers have approved the feature branch. That way, they're not in for any nasty surprises the closer we get to launch, and we get to dig into any issues with them as soon as they arise. At this point, we'd like to give a huge shout out to our colleague, Holly Sunderland, who is a huge driving force between the designs for Gaming Bible and whose idea this menu was. Finally, we of course have to mention that this was the first site that we launched whilst all working remotely. When we first went into lockdown back in March, we were lucky in that we all kind of settled into this pattern of video calls and constantly talking over Slack really quickly. Our productivity has remained unchanged throughout these trying times, and building Gaming Bible didn't feel any more challenging for us all working from home than it would have done if we were all together. So that's about it from us. You can visit Gaming Bible at gamingbible.co.uk, have a play with the menu, see what you think. And there's a piece about our work on the menu available to read on Medium that's written by our colleague Kieran and myself. We're very, very glad to have had the chance to speak to you all today. Thanks for having us.
Well, we are very glad that you came and joined us today. So thank you very much for speaking to us. That was great, fantastic. So we have reached the end of the presentations. I want to thank all the speakers and invite you all back in. We're going to have a little Q&A session. We have some questions. I am going to have a look and see how many questions. Oh, we do know what, this is fantastic. We do have some questions, because I was looking a bit earlier and I was getting a little bit worried that all the questions are going to come from me. So I am glad that it's not the case. Right. So let me see. Do we have, yeah, there we go. Gilly's here. Hi, Gilly. Let's see if we can get Laura is here as well. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we are all here. Before we get going with the questions, how are you all feeling now that the talks are over?
Now I'm okay.
Excellent, brilliant. I'm glad to hear it. I want to say, first of all of you did a wonderful job. So big shout out just for that. Fantastic. Well, very well. Well done. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first question here. I'm not sure exactly, actually this one, let's start with this one because this one is for Laura. So This is the question on how Recall could fit on all the Laura's talk. I'm not sure if I am getting that question correctly, but how Recall could fit on all of the things that Laura was talking about. Do you understand that question?
I think maybe the person is asking if Recall would be an state management solution that would introduce over engineer maybe, or if that would be a choice in certain point for not using context API or other solutions that React already has. If that's the case, my opinion regarding to that is that Recall, it's a new technology. I'm not saying that it's not good, it's amazing, but it also has the same issue as Redux, which at first it may introduce some overhead to get used to it. But regarding scalability, I think that Recall is better than Redux. And if you really have to get the benefits of atomic state management, that it's what Recall gives to you, and it fits your project, then I think that it's one really good tool to use. But if you don't need to use atomic state, if it's a small application even, I think that using Recall would just introduce overhead and over engineering.
We hope. Thank you. I hope that the person who did ask that question felt that was a good answer. So thank you so much. We have a question that says, "Hi, Gilly. Really interested in the Ming with mixins and style components. Is there any articles you could recommend to read more, or will your slides be available?" Now, I'm not sure if I'm the only one that can't hear Gilly now.
Hey, how's that?
There we go, the wonderful Bluetooth headphones. We all have that problem. Go for it.
Okay, so the slides will definitely be available, and I will write that article I've been meaning to write for ages, and I'll stick it on Twitter.
And then that's how we know they're going to be a good article about it. So excellent. Thank you. Right, so let me have a look here. So this is one for Gaming Bible team. What challenges did you face when implementing the navigation system?
So many. I mean, we've got so many different sort of pages that make up the Gaming Bible website, as we do with all of our sites. And because we have to generate everything dynamically, there's always sort of that challenge that, you know, just the slightest little tweak somewhere on one page could cascade onto other pages, which is always a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, I mean, we do a lot of stuff with React Router as well. That kind of pretty much handles our navigation on the React side of things, which is always useful. But yeah, a lot of stuff that we do is dynamic, just because of the amount of articles that we've got across all of our websites. It's a mammoth task managing 5 different news outlets.
I can imagine. Well, are there any challenges from Paulina's, anything that you can think of?
I mean, yeah, it's exactly the same what Joe said, that we have a lot of things going on there, and it was quite challenging to build it in the way how it looks now. So yeah. Great.
Right, I'm going to this. I think this question is probably more kind of a generic question for anybody to answer, really. Can you provide some implementation examples of API mocking with React? I don't know if anybody feels like, oh, I could answer this question.
So I think the first thing I'd say is that your React probably doesn't care whether it's talking to a real API or a mock API, ideally. So I think, yeah, how you mock your API probably depends more on the API that you've got than the front end solution that you're using. I did briefly talk about API mocking in my talk. I can provide an article or a link to a YouTube video about how to auto mock GraphQL APIs.
always resources always welcome. So excellent. Gilly, you're gonna have a busy time after this. Speaking of APIs, sorry, I just lost my question. Where did it go? Yeah, so speaking of APIs, this might be targeted at the Gaming Bible team again. Did you find building the components, but largely had to rely on several of the browser's imperative APIs to make the code more difficult to maintain? Or sorry, did that make the code more difficult to maintain?
Yeah, short answer, yeah. It's always a challenge kind of doing the cross-browser thing. We're lucky in that we kind of focus, so a lot of our users kind of tend to use 2 or 3 major browsers. So we tend to focus on those more, which does simplify things a lot. But of course, it does mean that for like a small percentage of our readers, the user experience might not be optimal. But I think as far as our coverage goes, I think we get something like 98% of our viewers will see the experience that we've sort of programmed, basically. But yeah, it's not without its challenges, don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, the menu might look slightly different on different devices. Your mileage may vary.
That's fair enough. You're getting a lot of questions around challenges, I'm realizing now. So, so this one, I've got a question here that says, hi Laura. You mentioned a few times context API can cause performance issues. Why? What is causing them? I haven't, as in the person who's asking, haven't noticed it in my apps when I use context.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, but does the person ask it? I haven't experienced.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of times that you have sort of had issues with context API, but they haven't used it. So I guess the question is ultimately, do you know why was it a problem for you, and do you know what caused it for you?
Okay, it's really hard to see the performance issue with the context API because you are going to suffer from this if the application tree is huge, your application is really huge, and like a big quantity of components are hindering again at the same time. So if you didn't experience that yet, this is a good thing. But yeah, it indeed happens. And when it happens, the performance issues are regarding to frame rate, then the application and all the process of the browser to deal with styles and hindering elements is start to get really slow. The user is going to have a bad experience. So in the end of the day, that's why we always recommend to start using context API at first, because you're just going to experience these performance issues when your application is a level really big, like when it's really big. And sometimes the majority of application in companies are not in that size. Even, I don't know, maybe if you're using the Twitter application or if you're using the Facebook application, which indeed are big company apps. But if it's not, I think that it's much straightforward to use context API or to use ReactJS, which is a library that deals with the performance issues for you.
Great answer. There's a lot of questions around specific use cases and different tips and styles. We got a lot of questions about people providing consulting services on React, training on React. So I am not going to ask those questions directly to you guys because I don't want to put you guys in a situation. But absolutely, there is plenty of training online. You can obviously reach out directly. I know as well that the YLD actually has training as well. So by all means, this is a community. There will be plenty of people that can be able to help. I am going to move forward with a couple of more general questions. This one is a question to everyone, and I think it's a quite good question, actually. So what are your favorite and worst features of React?
Use effect. Oh,
Laura went straight in leverage use effect.
I think that every React beginner when looks to a dependency array and starts thinking, what is that thing here? And then you start putting variables in that, and the use effect starts running again and again, and then you have a infinite loop, and then the person decides to not learn React again because it's a tricky one. But if I was to just say, yeah, one of the hardest one is use effect tool, related to a specific thing. If I would say a topic more generic one is state management. For my talk, it's one thing really hard to learn in React.
Excellent. And anybody else? What's your worst and favorite features?
So this is kind of cheating. Oh, sorry.
No, you first.
This is kind of cheating, but the performance, like kind of dev tools in Chrome for React are both wonderful and terrifying. Yeah, super useful, like when you can figure out what you're looking at. Maybe not a reasonable criticism of React itself, but I guess, yeah, profiling performance of React, I guess, is always a challenge.
Awesome. And Paulina?
No, I'm laughing because a few hours before this meetup, I worked with my friend Tom, and we tried to use a ref, and we failed with this one, and we said like, okay, this is end for today. We'll try to sort it tomorrow. So yeah, for today's use ref.
That's always a good approach when something doesn't work today. Leave it for a while, come back to it later.
Yeah.
Joey, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, compared to my early experiences with Redux, use effects are a cinch by comparison. I still have nightmares about sewing through screens and screens of Redux boilerplate. So if you're using that still, hats off to you. Whew.
I'm going to come in controversially and say there's still a bunch of Redux buried deep in our project. And if anybody is an Octopus customer and you may know the Wheel of Fortune, that's got a bunch of Redux in it. And I had to work with that recently. And I actually found myself going, you know what, actually, I quite liked how everything was separated. You know, the components were separate from the actions, were separate from the API service, and I could write all my tests kind of independently. And yeah, I mean, it's too much boilerplate. Of course, it's too much boilerplate, but there were some good times.
Excellent. I'm loving the different sort of opinions on here. This is awesome. Speaking of, so Laura, you mentioned use effects as your kind of pet hate, if I can use that word here. This is actually a question for Paulina and Joey, talking about use effects. So I think you guys have had this question before, you told me. And so you were talking about 3 use effects to rule them all. And to rule them all, exactly. So how, from your perspective, why did you have to use 3?
So it was just for readability. Of course, we could use just one use effect, to be fair, but it would be more difficult to navigate, and we have just split it into 3. So each use effect has different responsibility. Yeah,
definitely. I think it was Martin Fowler who said that, you know, any fool can write code that computers can read, but good developers write code that humans can read. And that was definitely what we were doing with these 3 use effects. We need it to be readable so the next person can jump straight in.
Fair enough. That's a good reason. Always a good reason. So I'm going to ask, so this one is for you, Laura, and this is about Redux. Is the Redux toolkit a way to reduce the time needed for a developer to get up to speed in a React application? This is probably something that all of you can answer, but this one was targeted at Laura.
Sorry, can you repeat again? Because I didn't catch the beginning.
That's absolutely fine. Is the Redux toolkit a way to reduce the time needed for a developer to get up to speed in React application?
Really good question. Yes, I think that it doesn't decrease all the overhead of maybe if you have really a huge Redux store and needing to understand, okay, I have to create an action, I have to create a reducer, I have to create a Saga middleware, everything. But when you read the Redux docs, one recommendation of their style guide is to use Redux toolkit, because the Redux toolkit is already a library, not a library, but a tool that comes with the Redux style guide. So you don't have to but be concerned all the times that you are manually following the style guide. The tool already ships the style guide needs for you. And all the process of creating the actions and reducer, it reduces all the boilerplate. So the answer is yes. Using Redux toolkit is one of the best things that you can do when using Redux in your application. And it's going to decrease the overhead indeed.
Any comment from anybody else on that? In that case, I have a follow-up. Oh, sorry, yeah, go on, Gilly.
I was just going to say, very well said.
Okay, excellent. In that case, I have a follow-up question, which is about sort of the not using Redux. What alternatives do any of you use over Redux?
Context API. But seriously, I would say that I like the overweight solutions, not the big ones, libraries that follow the Flux architecture, but because indeed the majority of cases that I got to follow is small cases of global UI state management. So I really like to use Zustan. It's a lightweight library, and it's really straightforward to learn. Anybody can learn when a new engineer comes to the code base. And for atomic state, instead of using Recoy, I like to use Jotai. It's really good too. So if I would have to suggest, that's my my main recommendations.
Very cool. We're experimenting with XState in our code base for some like very stateful applications. So this is like things like telephony dashboards that are monitoring kind of wait times across the whole company, and have like lots of complex state. So yeah, that's another one to consider.
That's good.
Excellent. Some tips there. So actually, Laura, your talk, I mean, some people might think that state management might be some of the hardest topics in React, and you know, it's probably quite confusing to find sort of how did you get into it? Like, what's your path of studying that?
So that was one of the difficulties that I had when I started learning React. That's what I said earlier, was one of my motivations to make this stuff. And the answer for this question is, it seems funny, but read React docs. They have really good pages there explaining about main topics that we have to be aware as React engineers, such as composition, lifting state up, and knowing how to architect a tree of components is going to make you understand where you should place your state. And then when you know how to deal with the state in React, really understand, okay, how can I use context API? What are these states tools with use state, use reducer, everything. I would suggest to start learning external library and external solution that it doesn't need to be too complex at the beginning, but this will allow you to, okay, I have a problem to solve, and then I have 2 options to follow. I can use React, or I can decide if using this external library is good. So at the beginning, learn React itself, and then try to learn other two, because this will give you more freedom to decide other options in the future.
Good, excellent. So we do actually have a couple of people on here that are quite new and quite beginners. So I am going to pick one of these questions after all, because I think, you know, we want to be here to help the community and help everyone starting out. So this is a question that goes like this, and I guess this is kind of to everybody. So if I stick to React hooks, use reducer, will it be okay in the future? Or I am new here and I'm learning React hooks, or should I change my path to Jotai? Very specific question.
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yes, of course. Sorry. So this is for someone who's very new to on learning React hooks. And the question is, so if I stick to React hooks, use a reducer, will it be okay for the future, or should I consider changing my path to Jotai?
So I'd say definitely wait until you find a problem that you can't solve before you try and introduce a new technology. Just try and keep it simple when you're learning. Fewer things can go wrong as long as you kind of understand all the bits you're using.
Yeah, that would be my answer exactly. Stick with it until you can't for whatever reason.
Yeah, because then you'll know why you changed.
Yes.
Very sound advice. Just to say as well, we have already mentioned that there might be some resources later, and that we will. I would probably suggest that the meetup group is the best one, because you can all go there and have a look at it. So we'll post some stuff there for anyone that's new, so some hot tips and some links so that might be useful for you. So I wanted to ask a question, and this question is to Gilly, and I'm actually going to use someone's comment because I think that there was a very good comment that leads into this question. So someone mentioned that it was a very nice talk about how your team stitched all of the technologies together to create a great solution. My follow-up on that is that obviously there's a lot of different features and different brands. And so when that happens, how do you handle developing custom features for different brands or clients? And I think this is sort of like a general thing for anyone doing white label, really.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, very lovely comment. Thank you. And great question. So I mentioned a bit in the talk that there'll be specific places where you'll have the knowledge of what the individual kind of themes or brands or clients kind of can and can't do. So there'll be like client specific assets imported into the theme file, and for each of the actual kind of applications themselves, they'll pull in components from common packages and libraries, but they'll each have their own individual index file, and that's a great place to have things like feature flags. So to start off with, if you've got features that are different across different libraries, across different clients, it's better, I think, to concentrate on saying whether or not a feature exists than which brand has which feature. So keep that in that kind of one place that knows about that brand. And as we're talking state management a bit, we actually use Apollo cache for a lot of our state management because we're using GraphQL. It works really neatly. And we prime our Apollo cache with these feature flags so that we can fetch those along with the data that we use to build the pages. So yeah, that's feature flags is the kind of one-line answer, I guess.
I think the more I hear about your Kraken platform, it sounds so much like our platform that we build at LAD. I think really cool. Your Kraken and our Honeybee would be great friends.
Oh, well, please, our storybook is all online. I'll add some links to that as well. So anyone who's interested, please do feel free to come and have a look around the storybook and have a look around Blueprint itself. We've just implemented storybook docs, so it's getting shinier every day.
Brilliant.
I think this is brilliant, and because of time, I actually do think this is not just because of time, but also I think this is a lovely place to end. We're talking about, you know, learning from each other, checking each other's work out, and how those things will beautifully fit together. Gilly, you also made a reference to a previous speaker that was at the conference, and yeah, so this is what the community is all about. It's all very lovely to see. I am going to wrap up here. I want to thank all of you so much for putting together these talks and for coming here and sharing all your insights and all your learnings and everything. It was fantastic. Thank you very much to all the speakers.
Thanks so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. For everybody else, there were a couple of other questions that are sort of more generic, which I am going to just quickly go through because they actually cover a little bit of what I'm going to do for the wrap up. So the first one, I think somebody was asking, are these talks going to be recorded and will they be shared? Yes, is the answer to both of those. We are recording this and it will be shared on YouTube. It will be on the WildD Tech Talks, and we will share a link both on Twitter and on Meetup as well when that happens. Also, you will be able to, on that YouTube channel, you will also be able to see all the previous talks from previous meetups and from the previous conferences, and there's a whole bunch of things. So for anybody who is new or want to learn more, that is a great place to start looking. So please do visit that. Right, let me see. I'm just going to make sure that I don't forget anything as we wrap up here. I wanted to make one comment as well on where people are from, and while this was happening, I put together a little list, and I am now going to spend a little bit of time reading this out because I think it's a quite marvelous list, really. We have people from Guatemala, from Poland, from Sweden, from Mexico, from South Africa, from Spain, from Romania, from Greece, from Portugal, from Russia, from Algeria, and from Brazil. And I think that is pretty awesome. I really hope that I haven't missed anybody in the chat that shared where they might be from. If I have, my apologies, but that's a pretty awesome list. By all means, if you aren't already following us on Twitter at ReactJS Girls, that's also where you will be able to see updates from this talk and anything else that we're doing. If you check out the hashtag ReactJS Girls, you should hopefully be able to see from previous talks as well, and you can get into a whole kind of like things that have happened in the past and really get to know the community properly if you're not familiar with it. I thanked all the speakers. I need to thank the event team, obviously, for making sure that everything behind the scenes work really well. And last but not least, I want to thank everybody that tuned in today. And again, what a list of countries. That's amazing. That's pretty awesome. So you can all now basically say that you have been speaking for a global audience. So I know some of you are on your first times here. What a way to start off as a first time speakers.
So what will be next in this case?
Paulina, what an amazing question. What is next
Universal,
in this?
present to Mars.
Exactly. We need to start live feeding out into the stratosphere. So I just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten to thank anyone. So we thank the speakers, we thank the event team, we thank all the audiences. I think that is it. It's bringing us to the end of this event. Yes, again, it will be recorded. It is being recorded. It will be shared with everybody. I think, if I'm not wrong, we will also be able to share the speakers' presentations as well. So you should be able to recap on everything, make sure that you didn't miss a single moment. And that is it. Thank you, everybody, so much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.